with RevOps Science, it's a concept that I've been working on for about 15 years. RevOps Science takes revenue data off the shelf and moves it into a strategy and projects in order to grow annual recurring revenue. And recurring is a word that you'll hear me say a lot because without recurring revenue, you don't have scale, and without scale, you don't have a startup. So three-time college dropout, mixed the shit, born and raised in New York City. Now I live in Dominican Republic. I'm living my best life out here. And RevOps Science developed from the way that I and the Successment team used to, and still do, serve startups in order to deliver them annual recurring revenue and scale. But it's also become bigger than that, right? It's become an academic curriculum. It's become a boot camp program for accelerator programs. It's become a coaching program. All arrows lead to annual recurring revenue growth. And what I think that makes RevOps Science really, really special is that we focused on underrepresented startups. We focus on their seat of power and influence and visibility within the economic environment in terms of economies of scale. And I've always said there's two ways to transform economies, right? There's either through business, it's either real estate or technology. Well, I really don't want to sell houses, so here I am creating $10 million annual recurring revenue with startups with RevOps Science. The differences are vast, but Dominican Republic, to me, it's really an extension of how we got nominated for the United Nations World Summit Awards this year. It's really about the Provoke Visibility campaign. The Provoke Visibility campaign, Janelle, is our commitment to creating $100 million a year in annual recurring revenue, $10 million at a time with startups within underrepresented circles. So in the same way that we work with underrepresented startup communities in the U.S., the Dominican Republic is a developing economy on the world stage. So very much in the same way that we have our mission in the United States, as we've expanded internationally, Dominican Republic just seemed like the perfect place to start because I have so many ties to the country. I grew up with a whole Dominican stepdad and his whole family, visiting here many times and falling in love with the country. Doing business here is very, very different. But in the grand scheme of things, I saw it as an extension of, first of all, self-fulfillment, because I'm a digital nomad. I'm a CEO. We're a developing firm at Successment. I have my daughter. I need to make sure that I'm good, I'm happy. I need to make sure she's good, she's happy. I need to make sure that my employees are taken care of and they're fed and they're happy. And at the same time, navigating very different waters here in Dominican Republic. It's exciting. It's great. The opportunities are vast. It just takes a different, same mindset, different approach. The experience moving my life and my business from the U.S. to Dominican Republic has been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal. I've gotten closer to God. I've gotten closer to values. I've gotten closer to my daughter. We've expanded offices. Now we have 4. We have the Kansas City, Missouri office, who handles all the Midwest business, New York, Miami, and now Santo Domingo, which is really considered the capital of the Caribbean. So the strategic location in the Caribbean and as a bridge between Latin America, Central America, our office in Miami, and then the rest of the United States, where we have good business, has been I can't pretend that I was this smart when I thought about it, but the strategic positioning and the way that we are able to make a really intentional focus of interchanging very different ecosystems, right? Like when New York wants a net new market and they want to expand internationally, the first thing they're thinking about is, oh my gosh, we need to go to Asia, we need to go to Europe. And I'm like, hey, what about Latin America? Easier penetration. We have relationships here. We have government relationships here, university relationships here, corporate relationships here, accelerator relationships here, VC and angel investment relationships here. So in the same way that we have all of those relationships globally, based and centered in the United States, I've plugged into that ecosystem here. So it's very easy for me, Jonathan, and Successment to move in between soft landings, between markets, share resources, innovate together, create better collaboration, and highlight different opportunities that might not have otherwise been recognized by underrepresented startups in the US. And speaking of underrepresented startups in the US, once you leave the US, that doesn't exist anymore. You're just an American startup, right? They don't look at any of the barriers that you might face navigating the startup ecosystem in the US. The startup ecosystem in the US, if you're underrepresented, depending on what demographic you're looking at, it represents 9% of the entire ecosystem. That's 9% of almost a couple of $1 trillion. Correct me if I'm wrong, you know? So when you move from that, when you're that small fish in this huge pond in the US, and then you come to Latin America or the Dominican Republic and you realize like now you're like a whale and everybody wants to do business with you and plug you in and find out how they can do business with you, it's an advantage for both sides. Because a country like Dominican Republic, you come in and you generate a couple of $1 million, it's a big deal, right? If the reverse happens, maybe not so much. So I see it as a legacy move for me, a legacy move for my family and my heritage, in order to connect both ends. It's been an amazing experience, business and personally. Were there any concerns in transitioning into a multinational firm? The answer is no. One of the things that makes Successment is being bold. Be bold, tell your story, ignite revenue. Not every startup, not every entrepreneur, not every team, not every family is prepared to take really big risks for really big rewards and move their company internationally. We work in an industry where we service highly scalable startups, high growth startups, right? Technology based. Successment is not. Successment is a services based business, not as scalable, right? So for us, in order for us to differentiate ourselves in market, we started off just kind of doing marketing for startups. Then we started incorporating RevOps. Then we built RevOps Science, which is our intellectual property. Then we started moving into programmatic and doing programming with different universities and accelerators. Having come from all of that experience, when you move into Latin America, my initial thought anyway, my instinct was, oh, I'm going to be a big freaking deal out there. Not so much, you know. They recognize that, but they're just like, okay, you were playing football. This is baseball here. You know what I'm saying? You were in a whole different league. We're kind of not sure how that applies here. So you kind of have to prove your value from scratch. And it's kept me sharp. It's kept me sharp. It's kept me agile. It's kept Successment sharp. It's kept Successment agile. We continue to innovate and we continue leading the industry for what it is that we do, which is revenue growth, right? Nobody else does what we do, especially in Latin America. We have no competition in Latin America. I can say that with full confidence. There are marketing partners in Latin America, there's PR partners in Latin America, there's operations partners, but firms that are specifically focused on, let us grow your recurring revenue, let us scale your startup together on different business verticals, because, you know, RevOps Science has 5 pillars of recurring revenue. There's no one that does that here. So I want to say the first year was let us educate the market. Now that we're in the second year, it's let us add value to the market. And next year, it's definitely going to be let's create an impact in this market. My daughter's transition was wonderful. She, long before we came to the Dominican Republic, at home we were practicing Spanish. We've always had conversations in Spanish, although it was much more difficult for her when she was in the U.S. without other people to interact with in Spanish. But the food, the culture, the music, the history, the dancing, all of that we practiced every day in large doses at home. We bought bilingual books at home. We did history lessons and cultural activities at home together with stuff that I would find. So the year leading up to us moving to the Dominican Republic, she was excited, like, oh my God, what is this magical place that you keep, talking about, right? And Zoraya's 9 now. She just turned 9 in October. But we're talking about a cultural journey that started like 2 years ago. So we're talking like she was 7, 8. So finally, when she got here, she wanted to like take it all in at once. Like she thought Dominican Republic was just Santo Domingo. Santo Domingo, I mean, we're the second largest island in the Caribbean. We're huge. Like, to drive from one side of Dominican Republic to the other extreme of Dominican Republic, it's like 4 hours. Like, this is not a small place. So watching her Spanish get refined, watching her pick up on the culture here, watching her blend in and talk about how excited she is to be here. Again, it just centered me in my purpose as a human being, and it gave me even more motivation to succeed as a CEO that's now a multinational firm. The business and the startup culture here is very, very, very different. And I've heard, and I think it's not an opinion that I share or that I would want to promote, but because it's a developing economy, they're probably, developing their business culture. That's just not true. It's like doing business with Asia. The values are different. How you show up and look matters. Your religion matters. Your family values matters. Who you know matters. Who you show up with matters. How well you get to know the person on the other end of the table matters. And these things all matter in the US, don't get me wrong, but the order of priorities are very different. You know what I mean? When you do business in the Dominican Republic, you're creating a bond, right? In the US, I felt that like with our startups and stuff because they're small, but in the grander scheme of just doing business in general, I don't believe that that's like a number one value for American business people, much less in startup culture. But here, that absolutely reigns true, right? Like in the US, I prided myself on provoke visibility, right? I'm going to show up how I want to with my sneakers, with my tattoos and all that. And it's like, you could do that in Dominican Republic, you want to, but then it's just you're going to seem even more foreign, even more risky, even more out of touch with the business panorama here. So one of the steps that I took is when I'm doing business in the Dominican Republic, I'm suited up because I don't want to be the guy in the room drawing attention for the wrong reasons. In the US, it's like cool to do that. Like, oh wow, this guy has a lot of freedom. He's made it. He's worked really, really hard to sit here in a t-shirt and sneakers, in San Francisco, in New York, and Miami. We can still do business. I don't care. In Dominican Republic, it's like it's almost a form of business and social acumen to show up appropriately. The speed with which people do business here is very slow because American culture and ambition pushes you to continue to grow, continue to achieve, make more money, work again, keep working, hustle, 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 hustle. Don't be bored. Idle hands are the devil's playground. In Dominican Republic, that's simply not true. In Dominican Republic, there's a huge emphasis on family and what in the United States would be called wellness, right? The Americans have to sit back, and in Dominican Republic, it's not even a conversation because wellness is ingrained into every fiber. If you're late to a meeting, you're late to a meeting. There's traffic. Life sucks. Are we still going to have a conversation, right? Contracts move slower because there are birthdays and weddings and things that come in between. And wait, I really want to get to know you. And, I want to call you on the phone. I want to follow you on social media. I want to have a conversation. I want to meet your wife. I want to meet your kids. I want to visit your house. Like, these are things that would be unsettling or unusual in the US, but here, that's just the way that things are. So you have a decision to make. If you decide to do a soft landing in the Dominican Republic, you're either going to adapt to the culture, not pander to the culture, because that's very different, or you risk being seen as kind of too risky, too foreign, too distant, and I kind of don't want to do business with you. So for me, as a CEO, maturing as a CEO, because we've had Successman since 2019, it was like an epiphany for me, but a good epiphany. I feel good in a suit, I feel good negotiating in Spanish. I feel good being invited to somebody's house where somebody's wife or maid is cooking a dinner and we're having a conversation versus going to a restaurant and spending $300 on, steak and wine because you're trying to impress somebody. That shit doesn't fly here. Is there any culture shock? Okay, so I'm mixed, but mixed ethnicity, but I grew up with heavy Dominican influences. So to make life easier, instead of listing everything, I'm just like, listen, I feel Dominican and this is what really moves my soul. I've been close to it my whole life. I was raised in New York City. It's the Dominican hive of anywhere outside of Dominican Republic. New York is just like, that's it. It's called Little Dominican Republic now, in Upper Manhattan of all places, not some, small neighborhood. So for me, I grew up, and even when I left New York, oh, you're super Dominican. My Spanish, my slang, my customs, my music, my choices. When you come to Dominican Republic, you realize how un-Dominican. You're not. No, you're not. You're not even close. You feel me? Like, you haven't lived here. You don't know what the national hymn is. You've never been to Eliseo before. You don't know who your nearest colmado is. So with business, it was more of the same. For example, one of the mediums of communication here in the Dominican Republic is WhatsApp. Email is under you. They do not really mess around that much with email. They really want WhatsApp. Another thing, a positive consequence of WhatsApp that saves me a lot of time on meetings are voice notes. Like, who would send, another executive a voice note of 30 minutes? Hey, these are the terms of the contract. I wanted to talk about this. I wanted your opinion on that. By the way, what are you doing on Saturday? Me and my wife are going to go to the coast. And that is perfectly acceptable, normal, to do business on WhatsApp. And mind you, WhatsApp, you can attach pictures and documents, and it's encrypted, and it's perfectly safe. But that was like a big deal to me because I'm used to writing these long emails, and they certainly have a place in doing business in the Dominican Republic. But that's one of the norms that I learned about very, very early, socially and business wise. There's that. Also, the price points. The price points are very different here. So you learn about when you're doing business in dollars versus when you're doing business in Dominican pesos or Mexican pesos in Mexico, or when we're dealing with euros, when we're dealing with different currencies, because we've done business internationally, but now that we're planted here in the Dominican Republic is different. You learn that numbers, they're like, whoa, that is way outside of our budget. So you have to be also prepared to adjust in that way. You know what I'm saying? You have to be willing to adjust pricing that's appropriate for the markets. Not to say that you got to go cheap, but if you price yourself out before you prove value, you're going to find it very difficult to do business here. RevOps Science is designed to deliver annual recurring revenue for startups. It's not designed to deliver sales. It's not designed to deliver marketing. It's not designed to do a capital fundraise. It's designed to orient from a strategy and a provisional perspective, meaning launching, getting in market, getting your hands dirty, in the direction of revenue. There are three elements of RevOps Science that cradle it. There's process, progress, and performance. Process makes sure that we have metrics on the clock and then goals and milestones on the calendar, and that every goal that's set has a timeline, people that are in charge of it, etc., and move that forward. Performance breaks out your revenue model into 5 revenue generating pillars: awareness, engagement, enablement, land, and expand. And making sure that your process is powering all 5 pillars, not just 1 or 2. You can't just be a sales organization, you'll never grow. You can't just be a marketing organization, you'll never close. You can't just be a product organization, because then you'll never have any visibility. We need to make sure that all those things are running at the same time. And the way that we make those things move and get away from just strategy or just conversation, or these are the frameworks, is parallel growth plans, which is, progress, which is the last P in RevOps Science. Parallel growth plans make sure that the actions that we're doing today produce metric outcomes that we can measure on a timeline. But in the grand scheme of things on the clock, you make sure that those little wins lead up to those big outcomes at the end. That's RevOps Science. How do we deliver RevOps Science? We deliver it for very early stage entrepreneurs and startups through coaching, because we take them through the frameworks and then we give them their strategy. We take the second way is through revenue readiness pilots. Revenue readiness pilots are 3 to 6 month programs where we get together all of the strategy and then the assets. We provision all of the assets. We write all of the copy. We design all of the creative. We get all of the social. We identify all the channels. We set up all the sales scripts. We make sure that there's a product roadmap. We make sure that there's a pricing strategy and a retention strategy. And we give you all the tools to do it, and we build it with you, and then you have to deploy it. And then the third and most powerful way to deliver RevOps Science is through a growth partnership. This is when we develop the strategy, develop all of the assets and provisions, and then launch with you in market. Our goal with a revenue growth with a growth partnership is always to get you to minimum in the first 9 months $40,000 MRR. It would be difficult to always guarantee that we'll get you to $1 million in your first year, although we've done that with Kinetic Clarity in their first year where they doubled revenue. We've done that with a number of startups. But to say that to a startup when we haven't evaluated where they are, we haven't really done a listening tour, we don't know what resources are available to them, would be irresponsible of me to say. So these are the 3 ways that we deliver RevOps Science for the 3 stages of startup growth, right? Pre-revenue MVP, startup phase, growth phase. And I've explained to you how RevOps Science really works. Then the number one takeaway that people should know about Successment and RevOps Science, it is the most powerful scientific tool to build recurring revenue, right? And I believe it was Warren Buffett, if it wasn't another investor who said this, but buying cheap work becomes very, very expensive. So you could listen to the YouTube guy, right, that's standing in front of the Maserati and piece together, all these automation tools and the Fiverr, offshore, virtual assistant. If it was that easy, then everybody would do it. So don't minimize the opportunity and the challenge that goes into it. However, with RevOps Science, you have an award-winning, and by award-winning, we've been awarded by the United Nations. Nominated. Let me correct. We've been nominated by the United Nations for our intellectual property in solving global issues that can potentially be solved by technology, and something that's produced over 36 $1 million plus producing startups that are underrepresented. So we already know that you're going to come to us under-resourced. We already know that you're going to come to us with small teams. We already know that you're going to come to us nervous. But partnering with Successment and deploying RevOps Science within your startup is, to me, the closest thing to, for sure, if you have a solid startup, of getting to your first $10 million in annual recurring revenue.